All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here on the Harmless Dave channel, talking about real music and doing it in real time for a few real people out here, just like you and just like me. So, Steve Perry was on the Record Store Day podcast with Paul Myers, and it's really good. I'm going to link to it so you can go and listen to it if you haven't heard it. It is a must for Steve Perry fans, and lots of interesting content. I'm going to focus on something that Perry talked about, that Paul Myers asked him about, which I'm so in agreement with Steve Perry on this. And recently I had a discussion with a musician who is kind of making fun of me a little bit because I like a certain style of music. And apparently, Steve Perry and I share a love for this style. So that's cool. Here's VanZant, and this is their album, Always Look Up. All right. If you're looking for a last minute holiday present for Christmas, not just any holiday, right? Amazon probably get this to you in one day, right up until the day before Christmas. But this is a fantastic Southern rock, gospel rock album, which, of course, honors the life and death and hope that we have in Jesus Christ. So, good on the brothers for making an album like this. Always Look Up. Please check it out if you haven't, and order yourself a copy. So again, yeah, Steve Perry's on this podcast with Paul Myers, and they talk about a lot of different things. They talked about how Steve Perry was inspired by Sam Cooke, his mother's 1956 Ford Thunderbird that they would drive around in, and that one speaker, that important speaker to the AM radio, which was blasting out things like Bing Crosby and Perry Como and Johnny Mathis, and he's talking about all the great Christmas music. And there's really a sweet spot, by the way. The years, say, like from 1956 to about 1962, the beginning of really the stereo era, where you still had the big band influences, and you had these great songwriters, and you had these powerful arrangements, and you had all of this instrumentation, and you had full spectrum stereo at that point, done on analog equipment. To me, it just, you can't top that. I mean, these records I find at the thrift stores, I put them on and I'm like, wow. And again, some people can't relate to it, but it's just something that I really enjoy, and when I hear it, I want to hear more of it. It just brings you back to a better time. But musically speaking, and Perry is going to talk about this, by the way, in the podcast. Before I get to that really cool part, he talks about the innocence and magic of that era. He talks about his grandmother during the holidays cooking, and he was basically trying to coax his grandmother into a room because he hung some mistletoe and he ended up kissing her on the cheek. I mean, it just, Steve Perry is so into nostalgia in a way that I can relate to growing up, because I had this big extended Italian family, and we used to go to one house that had, like, it was like a three-decker house in Belmont, Massachusetts. And you'd go there, you'd visit your aunts on the first floor. You'd go up, your grandmother was on the second floor, and then another aunt was on the third floor. And that was true. So everybody, we spent the entire day in that house, going from floor to floor, winding up usually on the second floor for the big feast, and for opening presents and watching football and eating all kinds of nuts that were in bowls and different Italian things. So yeah, those are times, folks, that you can't replicate today. It's just different now. But getting back to Steve Perry. So Steve eventually started talking about this subject that Paul Myers brought up. Paul Myers was reminiscing about how much he loved the song "Foolish Heart," and he kind of opened up this can of worms. And I've been talking to people about this with regards to the term yacht rock, which I don't like. Perry instantly said, "I think it's condescending," and I 100% agree with that. And the host, Paul Myers, is kind of like, well, but you should take it as a compliment because it's a good thing. It's a way that this current generation relates to this kind of music. And Perry turned it around. And this was so good what Steve Perry had to say, because he basically said it takes a lot of work to create great songs like that. And he says it's the quality of the songwriting. It's the arranging. It's how these songs were recorded without Pro Tools and without all this digital editing and doctoring. And it was a great conversation that Perry really pushed back and said, yeah, you can call it what you want to call it, but you should call it great music. And you'll find, he said, that a lot of these people who are into hard rock or heavy metal secretly love this stuff. And, it gets the label of cheesy, and I don't know. When someone says something is cheesy to me, that does sound condescending. So I give Perry a lot of credit for defining it and saying, yeah, I mean, he had Randy Goodrum, who is a great songwriter and also, I wouldn't say like a kingpin of the, I don't know why that word popped into my head, but he's he's a legend in the yacht rock world. I mean, he's made yacht rock records himself, and he's been involved with many, with other people, and obviously a great songwriter. And you got to give Steve Perry a lot of credit for using Randy or teaming up with Randy to write songs. But there are some other great things talked about in this podcast. Just how songs used to be designed, and this is so true, to be played on the radio. The radio adds a level of compression to the song, and then your song goes out there, and when it goes on the radio, it has a different persona than, say, if you listen to it at home. It's just the way FM, and in the old days, AM radio had a certain kick to it as well. But FM, once you had full stereo, that's why those records by like Bing Crosby, or not maybe after Bing Crosby, more of like the Dean Martin, Bobby Helms, I'm thinking about Christmas music. That era just, to me, is the best Christmas music. I mean, with all apologies to Mariah Carey, and if I hear that song one more time, I'm not going to listen to Christmas music anymore. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. The rest of my family loves the song. It's not what I want to listen to. I'll take Brenda Lee. I'll take, Burl Ives. That's the stuff I want to hear, and that's the stuff too that Perry is kind of talking about here, the nostalgia. But the great songwriting is what really defines what people now call yacht rock. And I love the fact that Perry is defending that kind of music and saying, look, I mean, you guys, you need a way to describe this, or you need a way to kind of say it's a guilty pleasure. The host is like, well, it's kind of like, no, it's just a pleasure. Why is it a guilty? Why do I feel guilty? I know people say these things now. There are terms that people use to describe certain things. Well, it's a guilty pleasure to listen to Rick Astley. I actually like the song. Okay, so why do you have to feel guilty about liking the song? I'm not supposed to listen to that because it's not cool. I'll tell you what, in the late 70s, the Eagles, the Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan, Hall & Oates, it was all super cool. Jackson Browne. Nobody said, oh, you're listening to that? You should be listening just to Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. No, I mean, there was a lot more respect for music that was difficult to make. And that's the point Steve Perry was trying to make. All of this stuff recorded analog until Donald Fagen, I think, figured out how to do an all digital album with the Nightfly. And even that has a certain warmth about it compared to the stuff that you're going to hear on the radio today. So, anyway, this was a great interview, and I will link to the interview so you can check it out yourself. Steve Perry on the Record Store Day podcast with Paul Myers. And before I go, again, don't forget about this album by VanZant, Always Look Up. I think you're going to like it if you enjoy Southern rock and gospel and just straight up rock. This is a great album by two brothers who apparently love the Lord, and that's always a good way to end a video just talking about Jesus, because not only, folks, is Jesus the reason for this season, Jesus happens to be the reason for every season. God bless everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, also Patreon, and buy me a coffee if you want to support the channel. Your help is much appreciated as I attempt to rebuild this platform, and I will again see you soon.